Good morning, everyone. This morning we will talk about Communication Ethics, Chapter 1, Lesson 2. But before that, let us have our lesson objectives. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to know how to communicate in an ethical manner and apply these principles to their communication process. What is ethical communication? Simply put, ethical communication refers to communicating in a manner that is clear, concise, truthful, and responsible. But in a profession that does not have an explicit set of guidelines, it can be challenging to discern right from wrong. Be that as it may, just as the medical industry has its regulations and ethical standards to adhere to, communication professionals should observe an unwritten code of ethical conduct that acts as the backbone of our communication strategy and a key virtue of professionalism. Putting an end to the ethical dilemma in communications. Ethics should be the cornerstone of every organization's communication strategy. We know this to be true. But what does it mean to communicate ethically? Because the topic of communication ethics is not typically discussed as often as it should. This frequently results in uncertainty on the part of communication professionals. Effective ethical communication is foundational to the success of an organization's communication strategy. While communicating factually, accurate messages honestly and transparently is central to ethical communication, it also extends far beyond that. It is important to understand that whatever we communicate should be guided by certain ethical principles. The U.S. National Communication Association, or NCA 1999, discusses this in their credo for ethical communication, stating that ethical communication is fundamental to responsible thinking, decision making, and the development of relationships and communities within and across contexts, cultures, channels, and media. Moreover, ethical communication enhances human worth and dignity by fostering truthfulness, fairness, responsibility, personal integrity, and respect for self and others. We believe that unethical communication threatens the quality of all communication and consequently the well-being of individuals and society in which we live. While reading question, why does unethical communication threaten the quality of all communication and consequently the well-being of individuals and the society in which we live? In their credo, there are four ethical principles of communication that are especially relevant for students today. Firstly, they advocate truthfulness, accuracy, honesty, and reason as essential to the integrity of communication. In CA 1999. Nowadays, social media and speeches in public have been so filled with black propaganda and whitewashing that there is a call to reiterate the need for truth and honesty. It is important to be accurate when we communicate and to have facts and figures to prove our assertions. It is important to be reasonable rather than to be too emotional or threatening when we communicate. Secondly, the NCA also endorses freedom of expression, diversity of perspective, and tolerance of dissent to achieve the informed and responsible decision making fundamental to a civil society. In CA 1999. In certain political climates, people may feel threatened to the point that they no longer feel that it is safe to express what they feel or think. This is not a good environment to live in. We fully agree with the NCA that to have a vibrant democracy, we must be able to hear different perspectives and have high tolerance for views that are different from ours. It is important to foster an environment where people feel safe enough to express what they think and feel, and for these expressions to be met with reasonable dialogue and debate, rather than outright censure of violence. Thirdly, the NCA 1999 states that they condemn communication that degrades individuals and humanity through distortion, intimidation, coercion, and violence, and through the expression of intolerance and hatred. 1999. This condemnation is important because it safeguards society from racism, sexism, and violence against oppressed peoples. History has shown us that a tolerance for hate speech as well as speeches that incite violence and the act of killing have often instituted such violence in society, whether this is in the context of slavery, colonialism, and misogyny. Lastly, the NCA 1999 states that communicators should accept responsibility for the short and long term consequences of our own communication and expect the same of others. All too often, there have been people who do not feel accountable for their actions. Therefore, if one risks to communicate maliciously, spread false news, or incite hatred or violence, he or she should be ready to face the consequences of such actions. States are beginning to realize this, especially in the poorest medium of social media. Every time we communicate, we should consider the consequences of our actions. If people were more responsible in their use of communication, there would be less conflict in this world. Even though the four principles above are short and concise, they are important because they help us discern the difference between ethical and unethical communicators. That's all. Thank you.